Welcome to the Hard Times Chronicles. My name is Luke. I'm sometimes referred to as the Hard Times guy. And today I'm going to talk to you about Craighead County, Arkansas. Some of my family members that live there. I was born in Craighead County and I lived in Arkansas from the time I was born till I was about 3 years old, and then I moved to Indiana. I still have a lot of fond childhood memories, not from the time I was born till the time I was 3, but until I was maybe a teenager, because my family went back and forth from Indiana to Arkansas on visits when I was young. So today I'm going to talk about that family, or some of that family again. And over time, I'm not going to make a series of videos where I make one after another about that subject like I have some subjects. I just finished a series about selling choice at auction. It took 3 videos and it could have took 15. I've left a lot of things that I could have set out. And it's the same with this family, or it's the same with my Arkansas childhood. If I start talking about everything that ever happened to me in Arkansas, I could make videos from now until the time I die about that and bore you to death. So I'm not going to do that, but from time to time I am going to make a video where I tell some Arkansas stories. And I'm going to make it easy for you to find them if you're interested in that kind of thing, or easy for you to avoid them if you don't care anything about that and you want some of my regular videos where I talk about antiques and things like that. I'm going to put these videos in a group entitled Craighead County. So if you get up my website, Hard Times Chronicles, and you want to go to a group called Craighead County, you can watch the videos that are collected in that group, and they'll be about Arkansas and when I was a child, or memories I have of Arkansas even beyond my childhood. The first one of those is already made. It's called Janetta Bailey. It's not in a group right now, but I'm going to make that group when I release this video, and the video will have the group will have 2 videos in it. The first one will be Janetta Bailey. The second one will be this one. I don't know what the name of this one's going to be yet. And then subsequent videos that I make about Arkansas after that will be included in the Craighead County group. I wasted way too much time getting that said, so I'm going to go right ahead with the video. For those of you who don't know, Craighead County is in the northeast corner of Arkansas. It's a fairly good sized county. I could probably look it up and tell you how many square acres or how many square miles it is, however they talk about such things. But it's the Jonesboro's the county seat, and I don't know how well you can see this plate. It's got an outline of Arkansas on it. Craighead County is the northeasternmost county in the state, and it if you can see the top of the state there, the bottom southwest corner of Craighead County is about right there, and it takes in that whole corner. And some of that is beautiful country up towards the Missouri line. There's some hills and kind of country I like, but most of it's ugly. It's sandy, it's flat. They raise cotton and rice there. I said it was ugly. I guess it's ugly in the eye of the beholder. I always considered it to be ugly. Flat, sand, cotton field, and rice paddies. There was my idea of beauty, but that's how Craighead County was, and for a great part of my life I thought that's what Arkansas was like, and really most of Arkansas isn't like that. But Craighead County, most of it is like that, and so that was my picture of Arkansas for a lot of years. I think I'll get up now and take you on a little tour, and then come back here and tell you and we'll talk about a couple of the things that you see on this tour. The light over here is not very good today, but that's a homemade sign that I made some years ago, and it says Lake City, Arkansas. Catfish in the middle on that picture of a catfish. Down at the bottom it says L.E. Smith, proprietor. Those of you who know what you're looking at know you're looking at butter churns, but for those of you that may or may not know, I'm going to tell you what you're looking at. The one on the far left, the brown and white Stoneware crock, that's a 4-gallon Stoneware crock dasher churn. The red thing behind that is a 4-gallon daisy churn. It's the kind of daisy churn that has like a can on the bottom of it to hold the milk and cream and make the butter. You turn that crank handle, it turns that shaft that goes down into that can, and there's wooden paddles on the end of it, and you churn butter with that. That's a daisy, D-A-Z-E-Y. It's got a patent date on it from 1917, I believe. The one next to it is another dasher churn, and these are usually made out of cedar. I'd say 90% of them or more is made out of cedar. That particular one, I think it's cedar. When you see that kind of a dasher churn, you're usually looking at cedar, but there are a few made of ash and other woods, so I won't say they're all made of cedar. Behind and beside it, that little blue one, it's just a smaller version of that same first one we looked at, that red daisy crank paddle gear driven churn that has a metal can on it, and I'm going to guess that one's about 2 gallons, and you can get a better look at the gear system and what makes them work. I think that one too has a 1917 patent date on it. And then this one here in the front, a lot of you'd recognize that one too as a daisy churn, D-A-Z-E-Y. It said it's embossed right on the glass. These got to be really expensive, and they started making them in China, and that kind of drove the price of them down again when those counterfeits got out there. But that happens to be an original 1-gallon daisy glass churn. Some of you folks might call that a crock bowl or a picket fence bowl or something like that. Actually, it's the actual name of that should be a milk crock, and it's pretty self-explanatory. That put the milk in it to start with and pour it into crocks and then pour it in the churns, and later maybe the butter got spooned out into that before it got spooned into that, and that happens to be butter mold. That's a round wooden variety. You took the wooden paddle, which I don't have a wooden paddle here today. I looked all over for one. I know I got one somewhere. And you take that paddle and you fill it up with butter, and then you set it down on a saucer or a plate, and you push the butter out of it like that. Pick that back up, and you've got butter there with that design on it. And last, this thing over here with a crank handle and a set of gears is the old-fashioned ice cream mixer. And I've got 3 or 4 of those around here too. That happens to be the first one I ran across when I was looking for one for this display, and I brought it over from the barn. Knocked the cobwebs off of it and set it there. And the last thing we're going to look at before I go back and sit down and talk to you is that picture. And in that picture you see one of those ice cream mixers, and out in front of it you see some fresh peaches and some fresh strawberries, and then back behind there is another Stoneware crock pitcher, and that's P-I-T-C-H-E-R, and it's in the picture, P-I-C-T-U-R-E. And the reason I have that picture, I call that my Aunt Edith picture. And I'll talk to you about that too when I get over there and sit down. I'm going to spend the rest of this video talking about Aunt Edith. And first thing I want to talk about is the cemetery and her tombstone. I think it was on that same visit that Janetta took us on a tour to Herget and Bay and Lunsford and all those places. I think it was on that same visit that we went to the cemetery. And it wasn't a part of the Janetta tour, although I think maybe Janetta went. But Larry and Charles were along too. In fact, we may have ridden in Charles' truck. He had a late model GM truck. I think it was kind of a charcoal gray. It was a four-wheel drive crew cab truck. And we either rode with him or he was along and he went separate in that truck. Given that he was a smoker and one of them smokers that can't not smoke for a very long time at all, he might have just drove his truck so he could smoke. I'm not sure. But we might have been with him in the truck. I'm not sure of that either. But we went to cemetery, and maybe two cemeteries. For some reason, I've got it in my mind that we went to a cemetery called Cane Island. And I've Googled that and I can't find anything on it, so maybe I imagined that, or maybe I'm getting that mixed up with something else. But for some reason I think we went to that cemetery, and the reason we went there was Papa, and who was Oscar Winford Mooneyham and Jenny Barlow Mooneyham were buried in this cemetery, and that's why we went there. Now, somebody can refresh my memory on that after they see this video, I hope. And I'll talk about those two people at some point in time, but not in this video, other than to mention they were my grandparents, and we went to their gravesite that day. We went, and I think this was at a different cemetery, maybe Lake City Cemetery or some Baptist church cemetery, I'm not sure. We went to another cemetery, and Aunt Edith was buried there. And that was the first time. I'm an adult, probably in my middle to late 60s. And that's the first time I knew that her name was not Edith. Her first name wasn't Edith. It was Lou, L-O-U. It said right there on her tombstone, Lou Edith Smith. And I never knew that. I never knew her name was Lou. Like, she was always Aunt Edith to me. The thing that I really liked about the whole deal was her, on the back side of her tombstone were the names of all 10 of her children. And I'm not passing any hints that I want my children to do that. I don't. But I thought that was really appropriate. And I liked it really well, that her children's name were on the back side of her tombstone, all 10 of them. Over there on the wall, we looked at it a minute ago, there's a sign there. It says Lake City Cafe. It's got a picture of a catfish on it. It says catfish on the catfish. And it says L.E. Smith, proprietor. and that is that alludes to Lou Edith Smith. And I just made that one day. I had an old tabletop and I was looking around for things to do, something to do with it, and I thought I'm going to make some kind of a sign that commemorates Lake City and reminds me of Arkansas. So I made that sign as if there was a cafe somewhere that Aunt Edith owned, or she never owned a cafe. She never had time to, as far as I know, ever to work outside the home. She had too many duties and children and responsibilities to have a job outside of the home, but because she had a full-time job at home. But I just like to think of it as her owning a restaurant, because she was a heck of a cook. And she cooked every day like she owned a restaurant. I mean, you could have run a restaurant out of her house. She cooked so much. She cooked for all them people, and they never ate, as far as I know, they never ate a cold meal. They had a hot meal 3 times a day. And sometimes what was in the last meal didn't get at was in this meal, but still she was cooking something and putting it on the table 3 times a day. While she was cleaning up the dishes from the current meal, she was putting together stuff for the next one. And that right there says a lot about her. So I made that little sign, and it probably isn't going anywhere. I guess somebody come along with enough money they could buy that from me, but I didn't make it to sell. I just made it for the reason I just told you about. So you saw that, and then we come over here on another table and looked at some things there. And since I made that little piece of video yesterday, I took that stuff and put it back where it belonged, or most of it. I think the ice cream mixer, one of them churns is here behind me, but I had some churn sitting over there. I had what's called a dasher churn that was made out of cedar, and they're pretty common. Most of you have seen those before. Then I had a dasher churn that was a brown and white 4-gallon crock. I had a daisy tin-bodied crank paddle churn that was 2 gallons, and I think it was blue. And then I had a red one that was a 4-gallon. Both of those, I showed you a picture of them and talked about. I think they had a 1917 patent date on them. And then there was a glass jarred 1-gallon daisy churn. And I didn't have an example of the old wooden squat bodied churns that had the crank on the side and the paddles turned like a paddle wheel. I didn't have an example of those. I've had several of those in my lifetime, but I don't have one right now, so I didn't put it over there. But I had that display over there just so I could talk about Aunt Edith making butter. And I couldn't really remember ever seeing her make butter. I'd seen lots of her butter, and I'd even been there when people stopped at the house to buy butter from her and have her go into the refrigerator and get them some butter that was wrapped in wax paper and get their money. And people also bought eggs from her. She sold butter and eggs, I guess, her whole life. I digress, but I'm going to go ahead and digress for a minute. When they bought the property over in Bowman and built a new house and moved in it, I was told, I don't know who told me this, but whoever did, I'm sure knew what they was talking about, that a lot of the money that they had saved in their lifetime, maybe all of it, had come from that they paid to get that place in Bowman, and I was told that that was the first place that her and Uncle Marvin ever owned. all the rest of their life they'd lived in a sharecrop situation or a rented property. And that was the first piece of land and first home that they'd ever owned. And a lot of that money come from her milk and egg money. And I wish we had examples like that for the young people of today that think they want to have what the older people in their lives have, and they want it now, and they deserve it now, and if they can't get it one way, they ought to get it another, or the government ought to give it to them. They just ought to have to live in the times that even Edith and Marvin Smith lived in and do the way they did. And I'm going to tell some stories about that too one of these days, but let's get back on subject and talk about Aunt Edith again. She made butter, and so I had some stuff over there laid out. I think I had a milk crock and a butter mold over there too. And after I did that yesterday, I had some other questions that I wanted to ask Larry, but one of them that I couldn't get an answer for was what actually did she make butter with, because I couldn't remember. I don't think I ever saw her make butter, and I don't think I ever saw any of that equipment at her place. The only thing I could remember was I thought she had a dasher churn that was a crock, much like the brown and white one that I had over there. I thought she had one of those. I think I can remember it sitting on the floor next to the cabinet in the kitchen. And so I asked Larry, and he said I was right, that she didn't have any of that other kind of stuff. In fact, Larry told me that he didn't even know what I was talking about when I was telling him about a daisy churn. So Larry's led kind of a sheltered life, I guess. But he could probably tell me things about tractors that I don't know, too. So we all had an education about churns there. One of the things that I said I couldn't find and didn't have was a butter paddle. And that's a part of the process, too. Another thing that I didn't have in the picture that I should have had was just a glass container or maybe another bowl or smaller bowl to put the buttermilk in. I didn't think about doing that at the time, and when we were looking at the milk crock, I talked about maybe having the milk in the crock and pouring it into churn, but I didn't say that they used that milk crock was there because it's a part of the process too. It's a tool that you need if you're going to make butter, or you need it or something like it, because whenever you finally get the churn to produce butter and buttermilk, you pour the buttermilk off and you put the butter in something like that milk crock. And you take that paddle and you work that butter until you get all the buttermilk out of it. And I didn't mention that yesterday, but it's part of the process. And I keep all that stuff around here because I like old stuff like that, and I like old processes like that. But I also like to think about my Aunt Edith and her butter and eggs that she sells. And I got some old egg cartons up there, star egg crates, is what they're called. I should have put them. I don't think she had one. She might have, but I should have put them in the picture too, just so I could have talked about her chickens and her eggs, but maybe another day. One of the things that I did have in there was an ice cream mixer. In fact, it's sitting here behind me. It's red. And it had a picture. And I call that my Aunt Edith picture. And like most things around here, it's for sale. I don't really want to sell it, but it had a price tag hanging on it. Quite a bit more than I paid for the picture, which is what I call a do not want to sell it price. I think I'm going to just take that price tag totally off of it because that's something I don't want to sell. It's not a great piece of artwork. I think it's probably a numbered print of some kind by some artist that I might research and find out he or she's pretty good. But I didn't buy it for the quality of the artwork. I bought it for the subject matter of the picture. And it's an ice cream mixer, an old green and white crock pitcher, one of them little wooden box things that you put strawberries in, and 4 or 5 fresh peaches laying there. And it just reminded me of homemade ice cream in Arkansas. And the homemade ice cream in Arkansas was at Aunt Edith's. And I could just see that house, and I could see that porch across the front. This little 4-room house with brick siding on it, brown brick siding. It's like asphalt shingles that looks like brick for you people that don't know what brick siding is. It's set up on cone-shaped, I don't know whether that stuff was stone or concrete, but it's shaped like a cone. Had a piece of flat rock underneath it and in that cone, and then the house was built up on that. I don't know why in the world they built a house up on that. All they did let cold air into the house. You had to put underpainting on it to keep the floors warm in the winter. Then they still wasn't warm. You froze to death down there next to the floor. That old potbelly stove couldn't keep that floor warm. But that's the way that house was built. That's the way a lot of them was built there. I could understand it if it was right there next to a creek or a river or something where that house was built up like that to keep the water from getting in it. But there wasn't any water ever going to get in this place, although the ground was flat enough for a river 15 miles away to get in that house if they had a major flood. But there wasn't any large enough body of water near that house to ever get water under it, and all the ground was sand at all. But anyway, that's what the house looked like. And it had a porch out on the front of it. Wooden porch. And it was probably at least 3 feet, maybe 3.5 feet off the ground. Had 3 or 4 steps going up to the front of it. Stand out there in the front yard or out there by the mailbox or the road looking at the house. And over here on the right end of the porch there was a big old chinaberry tree. And over here on the left end of the porch is where, when you made ice cream, the ice cream mixer set. You crank that thing. Another thing I didn't have was a burlap feed bag. Actually, I had one in the garage, but it was so rotten I didn't even want to bring it in here and get things dirty off of it. At my house when I was a kid, with my background and my childhood, the homemade ice cream operation in and of itself wasn't enough to just be Aunt Edith's in my memory, because on my mom's side of the family we made a lot of homemade ice cream too in the summertime. And on my mom's side of the family we put a rug up on top of the ice cream mixer, one of them little loop rug things that we put it up there to hold the ice in and to keep everything held down while you turned the crank. But at Aunt Edith's they put burlap bags up on top of the thing, and I remember turning on that thing, and the older cousins would be turning on it, and when it gets so hard you couldn't hardly turn it, then it would be my turn or Lynn's turn or one of the younger kids. We'd get to turn it, and heck, we couldn't hardly turn it, and they'd laugh at us and call us wussies and stuff like that. But we made that ice cream. But what makes that picture remind me of Aunt Edith is those strawberries and those peaches that are in the picture, because 2 of the choices that you always had for homemade ice cream was, do you want strawberries in it or do you want peaches in it? And they had both. And I don't remember a time ever that they made homemade ice cream at Aunt Edith's that you weren't offered that choice, strawberries or peaches. I don't know whether they put the strawberries and the peaches in the ice cream after they made it and you had to take one or the other, or whether you got to add the peaches or the strawberries or just have your ice cream plain. I don't remember that, but I do remember strawberries and peaches. And so that picture just, when I saw it, it struck a chord with me. And I bought it for that reason, and I still got it for that reason. Aunt Edith and her family always said, and I think this is the only place that I ever drank fresh milk. In other words, right out of the cow, fresh milk. That's the kind of milk they had. In my remembrance, they always, out on the farm, had a cow. I think it was always a Jersey cow. They may have had more than one cow at once. I don't remember that, but I think usually there's one cow met their needs, and they had and it was a Jersey cow, and that's what she preferred. And Uncle Marvin even tried to teach me one time how to milk a cow. Didn't last very long. It was kind of like the time I got to chop cotton. He decided he couldn't afford me, or he didn't have the, I won't say he didn't have the patience. The man had to have an abundance of patience to raise a family. He did, but he didn't waste much time trying to teach me how to milk a cow. He showed me what to do. He watched me try to do it. He wasn't pleased with my efforts, and he got me out of the way, and he finished the job and went to the house with the milk. But I did get a chance to try to learn how to milk a cow with one of them Jersey cows they had. And even after they moved to Bowman, and I was telling Larry this last night on the phone, he didn't remember it, but I do. Me and Betty pulled in over at their house at Bowman, and there was a rope about probably 1.5 inches or greater in diameter rope, big old rope, hemp rope, and it was tied onto the wrought iron support for the carport, and it was probably somewhere between 50 and 75 foot long. Out there on the end of it was a Jersey cow, and they had a cow tied on a rope tied to the carport. Larry said that didn't last long. He said Daddy got rid of that. He decided he didn't milk cows long enough. But I remember that cow, and Edith had that cow so she could still make butter. She wanted that fresh milk and that cream that she needed to make butter with. I'm going to speculate again, and I'm going to try to remember what the table looked like in their kitchen. Then I'm going to wrap this video up. And I can't remember much about it except that it had to be a pretty big table, because I can remember getting up there when we stayed there, or going getting up and going to breakfast. And I don't think everybody, when they had company, I don't think everybody could get around the table at once for breakfast, but most of us could, and some of us stood back. When we had dinners there where it was a pitch in and everybody came, it was usually summertime, and we treated it like a picnic, and that big long table was, people weren't sitting there and eating always. Sometimes they were, but it had the food all over it. Sometimes you got your food and carried it somewhere else. Another practice that they had, and aggravated Betty no end, still does. You can tell by the tone of her voice when she's talking about it. Anytime they had a big meal like that, and women, they, of course, Aunt Edith did the yeoman's part of the work. They were having it at her place. She had cooked a whole bunch of stuff and had it out there like she always does. And then other people came and they brought a covered dish or 2 or 3. I don't know how many, what the contributions were from the other people, but everybody contributed something. And they got all that ready, and then they called for people to come and eat, and what they did was all the men got to come and sit down and eat, and the women stood around waiting for the men to get done before they ate. And Betty didn't like that one bit. She just didn't understand why that the women couldn't sit down and eat with the men. And she still don't like it. You can tell when she talks. She'll still tell you about it. The women had to wait till the men got done eating before they could. And that's true. That's the way they did it. But I guess none of the Yankees that she was raised up by and with and around, I guess none of them ever did that. So she didn't like it, and she still don't like it. But getting back to that table, I don't remember what that table looks like, except I think it had an oilcloth tablecloth on it. I just can't get a picture of it in my mind, and any picture of it that I conjure up, I'm looking at one of them old oilcloth tablecloths. And I can't even tell you what it might have looked like, except it was worn. And you could see the fabric in the oilcloth. Those of you who don't know what oilcloth tablecloth is, you're just going to have to Google it. But it was some kind of fabric that was treated with something else, kind of like a plastic, but wasn't a plastic. And it made a waterproof protection to put on your table. And I believe there was one of those on whatever Aunt Edith's table was. And the chairs around the table, there was a lot of them. And I think they even gathered some of them up from other rooms when they had all them people there. Because the chairs was not a set of chairs. There were several different kinds or styles of wooden chairs around that table. I'm going to wrap this video up here, and hope I've given you something to think about and something to talk about. Maybe some of you don't remember one thing or another, and you can refresh one another's memory. And like my video if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you know some of the answers to these voids I got in my memory, comment. Let me know what was going on, or what I forgot, or what I got wrong, or what I got right. Until the next time, I'm a Hard Times guy. Have a good day.